So this is going to be the first of a multi-part series talking about my favorite series of books, the Dune series. So there are 6 books written by the original author, Frank Herbert. Now I know there are some written after the final book that he wrote that are written by his son. I have never read any of those. I hear diverging opinions about them. Some people say they're good, some people say they're not good. Either way, all 6 of the books written by Frank Herbert, I think, are worth reading. Of course, Dune is the most famous, but let's talk about them for a little while. So this first video is going to be a broad overview of the series, and then I'll do one video each talking about each individual book. So this collection of the first 4 books was given to me by my grandfather when I was probably about 13. So it came out, I believe this collection came out about the same time, or maybe a little bit after the 4th book, God Emperor of Dune. That's why it's included. The other 2 books, Heretics of Dune and Chapter House of Dune, are not in this collection, but I obtained them later on. Pretty cool overall. I think this package, of course, it has a huge nostalgic value given to me by my grandfather. He gave it to me when I was about 13, which is the perfect age to read the first book. I also have an illustrated version of the first book. My mother got me this used for Christmas. I think it's out of print, but the illustrations in it are pretty awesome. We'll talk about that more when we talk about the first book. Again, there are 2 other books that aren't in that little collection I have. Heretics of Dune, which is the 5th book, and Chapter House of Dune, which I had in paperback and is now at the Bookworm in China. I used to live in China, and I took it over to read it. I had a real slow burn on this series. So the first book, Dune, I read probably when I was about 13 and understood like maybe 50% of it. A lot of big words, a lot of nuance that a young 13-year-old was not picking up on. And then I didn't really remember a lot of it, and I didn't really like it. It was more of like a struggle to get through because it was way above my reading level. And I reread it again when I was probably about 16 and was like, whoa, this is something crazy. This is something awesome. Absolutely love this. And then immediately picked up the 2nd book in the series, Dune Messiah, which you can see here, and Children of Dune. And I pretty much read those 3 back to back to back. And again, amazing series. Even then, there was stuff that I just was not picking up on or maybe didn't understand or stuff like that. You know, it was very, very deep reading for even a 16-year-old to understand. But those, 13, 16, that's about the perfect age to read the first book. It's about, a coming-of-age story about a young son of a duke. We'll talk more about the plot and things like that when we go over it in its own dedicated video. But then did not pick up the 4th one, even though I had it. It's in my collection here. And I was probably 18 or 19 before I read that. I was in my first year of college when I read God Emperor of Dune. Out of all the series, God Emperor of Dune is by far my least favorite, or at least it was at the time I read it. I never reread it. I'm going to probably get it on tape and reread it and see if there's, maybe I like it a little bit more. And so, at 18 or 19, I read this one, and then I didn't read Heretics of Dune or Chapter House of Dune until I was probably 23. So these 3 will say, I read all these when I was 16 and 17. Read this one when I was probably 19. And then, another 3 or 4 years before I read the last 2 books in the series. They're all really, really good. I'll talk more about why the 4th one is by far my least favorite, and it has nothing to do with, like, the story. Well, I guess it has to do with the story, but it doesn't have to do with, it's a lot different than all the other ones, and it's just not as good a quality as the other ones. There's some things that really frustrated me about it. But overall, this series is amazing. I think it's one of the deepest, not just science fiction series of all time, but just book series of all time. I've only read the first 2 Lord of the Rings, but I consider Dune superior to the Lord of the Rings. Controversial statement. I know people are freaking out about that now. I'm going to get some stuff in the comments. Let's fight it out in the comments and try to raise my YouTube profile a little bit. I have not read Song of Ice and Fire, which this series is the Game of Thrones, which the Dune series is sometimes compared to. I've not read those. I watched the first 3 seasons of Game of Thrones, and then kind of checked out. And I know that everybody keeps telling me to get back into it. Maybe I'll get around to reading the books of Ice and Fire, Song of Ice and Fire, at some point, but not right now and not in the near future. I got other stuff I want to read. This has some really great themes in it. I'll talk more about that in a separate video, just detailing some of the themes and what's great about them. So like, comment, and subscribe, and be on the lookout for my video about the themes of Dune. And then I'll do a separate video for each book.